All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Um, Greetings from where I'm sitting here in New York City. Great to be talking to all of you today. My name is Kevin Brown, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Onbe, and I'm joined by Melissa Nukas, who is our Senior Director of Marketing. And so we're here today to talk to you all about a really exciting study that we had just conducted on engaging the under 40, so Millennial and Gen Z consumer in a digital world. No, we've all probably in the last 18 months heard, read, talked a lot about this, and so we have some great primary new research to share with you. And so the goal for today is, and we know this is for many of you in the Eastern or Central time zones, right in the middle of your lunch hour. So hopefully a quick 30-minute perspective on our research, what we found, and then some implications for you and your business. If you're a marketer, if you're in finance, if you're a business practitioner, how do you take these insights and ultimately optimize how you are targeting, reaching, and engaging this kind of very large and growing segment of our overall population. So just a couple pieces of housekeeping. We will have time for Q&A at the end. As you start to think about questions, and we are going to take those questions at the end. So as you start to think about them, there should be a questions box that you'll see. Get them in there. To keep this interactive, we're not going to have too many poll questions, but we will have one poll question, so it'll be pretty self-explanatory. Stay tuned for that. And let's get into it. So if we go to the next slide. So the goal here today, I'll tell you a little bit about Onbe, why we think we're qualified to be here and talking to you about this study. We'll go through the study itself, what we found, our methodology, and then we'll talk about, I would say, a couple outputs which might be leading to where we're heading. So some really interesting findings around influencer marketing, the impact or where I would say the convergence of influencer marketing with digital rewards and incentives and payments, and then how that informs your strategy, and of course over at Q&A at the end. So on the next slide, just a little bit about Onbe. So we are Onbe. Onbe is a B2B payments company where we deliver payments on behalf, right? You can see what we did there with the brand. So on behalf of our corporate clients. We have you can see some of the stats at the bottom, but we have a deeply held belief that if you are an organization or a company that is sending a payment to a recipient, and that recipient might be a prospect, it might be a consumer, it could be someone in your workforce, so an employee or a 1099 or gig worker. If you're not using that payment and driving further engagement, so whether that's a marketing message, whether that's a referral, whether that's a communication, if you're not using that payment to engage, you're missing out on a huge opportunity. And so for us at Onbe, delivering those payments on behalf of our clients and adding that layer of engagement and then data onto that payment, that's what we love to do. And so for us, so much of informing our clients, their position, and overall how they engage better with their recipients. That's why we're here today conducting the research that we are. So let's get into the next page. It's a little bit about us, and I'll pass it to Melissa to talk about the study.
Thanks, Kev, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'll jump right in and give a little bit of background and get into our research. So understanding the under 40 consumer. So the goal of our survey was to discover what drives brand loyalty and purchasing behavior within this demographic, and then also determine actionable ways that brands can leverage these findings. So to do this, we surveyed about 1,000 American consumers between the ages of 18 and 39, more commonly known as Millennials and Gen Z. This group of digitally savvy consumers has an enormous amount of untapped purchasing power. So it's become increasingly important for brands to understand how to engage with them in an increasingly digital world. The oldest Gen Zers are already hitting the job market, and in 2020, millennials surpassed baby boomers as the largest living generation. So if we move to the next slide. So we've all seen a universal shift to digital over the past year, right? But these generations are digitally native. Many of them grew up online or started using the internet and social media at a young age. To them, these things are an integral part of everyday life and have been for as long as they can remember. And as a millennial myself, I personally remember the day we got a family computer that was plugged into the phone jack in the kitchen, and I'll never forget the sound of the AOL dial tone. I think that's ingrained with me forever. So it makes sense that these consumers, connecting with these consumers, calls for a digital strategy that feels more personal, connected, and attuned to how they learn about, shop with, and engage with brands. So I'm sure the question everyone on the phone is asking is great. So how do we create these branded digital experiences that resonate? And based on the data from our survey, we focused on 3 actionable areas that will help you improve your overall digital strategy. And those are influencer marketing, spend data and personalization, and digital rewards. So brand loyalty is nothing new. It's something that brands have been trying to figure out, how to build this loyalty and drive purchasing behavior for as long as they've existed. Um, but with the popularity of social media and the digital first mindset of these 2 generations, influencers are perfectly positioned to drive real measurable results. And as you can see, our survey confirmed the power of influencer marketing. So over 70% of those surveyed made a purchase based on an influencer recommendation, and about 50% switched to a new brand based on an influencer's recommendation. Statista also found that the global influencer economy more than doubled between 2019 and 2021, reaching $13.8 billion. So that data is impressive, but when you take a step back and you think about why influencer marketing is so successful with Gen Z and millennials, it makes sense. Influencers are trusted online personalities who integrate brand content with their own original content. So it not only meets these generations where they're spending a lot of their time on social platforms like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, but getting a recommendation from an influencer feels like getting a recommendation from a friend. So it creates this more personal digital experience and helps bridge the gap and build this connection between businesses and their consumers. So Kev, I have to ask, have you recently made a purchase based on an influencer's recommendation?
So the answer to that is yes. I feel like I'm swayed, easily. So I think 2 things. One, I'll probably answer your second question. I have made a purchase based on just a pure Instagram ad. Looking at you, shiny new hair pomade. Uh, that was one. But I think that, yeah. So I uh, a, a influencer that I follow, a guy named Michael Chernow, so founder of Seymour's Meatball Shop, big fitness enthusiast. He's an influencer and was promoting Whoop, a Whoop fitness band, and I that's not a small ticket price, but and Mike talking about his fitness and his health had convinced me. There was a promo code attached to it, and I made the purchase. So I am certainly susceptible to it, but I think like you hit on the intrinsic, like that motivation of like, even though he and I do not know each other, it personally, and it was the ability though to be able to say I trust him. I've seen his content for a long time, and I'm going to take it. So yeah, absolutely.
Right, exactly. I mean, I've also been influenced many times actually. So I follow a lot of fashion influencers, and most recently, I purchased a dress from a smaller Australian brand that I probably wouldn't have even known about it had it not been for an influencer.
So I mean, I think that's interesting though, because you talk about a smaller brand. I mean, so a lot of us on the phone are marketers, and the question becomes, okay, great, I want to jump into the water, right? The influencer water is warm, especially if you look at these stats here, which I think would be pretty compelling. But you know, for some of us just testing into the channel, what if you don't have the budget or want to go right to the budget of the mega influencer? Like Mel, what's your thought? Like what's the move there?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, across a lot of the industries that you see on the slide here, it's worth noting that there are so many different levels of influencers. So from micro with a few thousand followers to mega influencers with millions of followers, but a lot of the times you'll find that the ROI on a smaller influencer is actually a better investment than a more traditional marketing tactic.
All right. I mean, yeah, and I think that's probably, look, for most of us that are marketers, the ability to be able to test and learn and expand is great. So to your point, going back to ROI, if ultimately you could start there and want to expand, or if the sweet spot is staying right there within the niche, I mean, it goes back to how we're driving down acquisition cost and ultimately driving up customer lifetime value. So I think, what do you think? Should we do the poll question at this point?
Yeah.
So there's the poll question for everyone else in the audience. Have you ever made a purchase based on an influencer's recommendation? So we'll pop up. There should be the radio buttons that come up. Yep, there you go. So we'll give it a couple seconds as people are filling out the difficult yes or no. We'll give it 10 more seconds. All right, what do we think?
So the audience agrees. We are all easily influenced.
Wow. 88 to 13. You know, when we were coming in, when Melissa and I were preparing for this webinar, it was interesting because we had the the point about if it was more no than yes and yes than no, but man, this is pretty clear. So I think that not only does it validate the data and what we've seen, but I think it starts to speak to if that's not a clear call to action, if you're in the business of selling a good or a service, especially to consumers, although there can be B2B influencers as well. I think there's your justification as you go to your next kind of strategy planning session, financial review, or set of recommendations. So Mitch, if we put the webinar back up and move on to the next page, let's stay on that trend for a second, and let's start to move into the second piece of what we talked about earlier, which is great. Influencers are there's the opportunity to be able to drive purchase intent and drive through the funnel. But let's talk about your brand. So these two stats, when we got them back, just honestly blew me away. 90% are likely to spend reward payments with the same brand that offered the reward. And in many ways, to me, that's the holy grail, right? So the opportunity to leverage an incentive or a rebate, and then fundamentally say, go spend this, and then to be able to get that as a brand, have that spend back to you. Talk about the extension of LTV, the extension of unit economics, and just the power that comes from really another connect point. I mean, really, really compelling. And then the second stat here on this page about 80% saying special promotions make them more loyal to a brand. To me, that's just gravy. If you're getting spend back as a brand, and then these promotions are further enforcing that loyalty, so let's start to connect those dots where we're having whether it's an influencer at the front end of the campaign, driving that spend or that promise of that spend, and you're getting spend back, which we're going to talk a little bit about spend data and why that's compelling in a minute. I think that is, for us, a really, really great and powerful takeaway, and one we wanted to make sure to highlight, or as my colleague and friend George says, double click on. So moving to the next slide. So let's talk about this. So if there is now the desire to say, yes, if you give me a reward, right, this under 40 consumer, if you give me this reward, there is a significant percentage of folks that will spend back with the brand. Then the question becomes, if that's the what, then how does that happen? And right here and right now, the ability to be able to deliver digital payments or digital rewards, so putting it on a virtual card, I think for many of us, one of the looking back through the last 18 months over the pandemic has been the enormous, especially here in the US, I know globally, but we have some stats for the US, a just explosion in terms of contactless and mobile wallet usage, right? So the ability to be able to put a virtual card into your mobile wallet. So that's Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, Google Pay. So the ability to put that in your wallet and then go and spend those dollars. In the US, we saw an uptick in the last year, so up 29% of mobile wallet usage, driving up the number of purchases made there to over $465 billion. So not only is the desire to receive those rewards and spend back on those brands there, but now I would say for exponential growth, the ability to actually have that consumer ability to be able to utilize that reward, spend it online is really, really powerful, because we're now, again, at a point where there's the confluence of the desire and the ability, which makes a really, really strong recipe for that success. All right. And Mel, I think there was a point before we go to the next slide, Mitch. I think that
Yeah.
right-hand circle. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's another interesting and compelling point we want to make sure to talk to the folks in the audience today about.
Yeah, definitely. So, when we say spend anywhere, you mentioned it earlier, but spend data can be such a powerful tool in getting to know your customer better. And it's something that we offer that many of our clients find to be such a huge benefit to partnering with us. Of course, we take privacy incredibly seriously, but at an aggregate level, even spend data can offer things like rich demographic information, spend categories and channels, like are their customers spending online or in app or in store, how much and how frequently they're spending. So, when you take a step back and you have this access to this aggregate spend data, it can help with everything from developing marketing campaigns and future promotions, and even give insight into potential, new customers and segments to target. So incredibly useful tool in getting to know your current and even potential customers.
Yeah, totally agree. Which I think gets to, again, being respectful of everyone's time. And again, thank you for joining us, for many of you on your lunch hour. But some of the takeaways then that we've kind of surfaced up. So three, I would say, core findings translated to immediate next practical steps, so you can leave this webinar with some very clear takeaways. Number one, if you are in a brand, a B2C, but again, I would argue even a B2B brand, and you're not thinking about how you're building an influencer program, you should be thinking about it. Reach out to us. We're happy to share the results of this webinar with some more details. So you can really, as you're thinking about building the case within your organization or your company, we're happy to share those. The second piece is absolutely start to think about how you build an incentive program around anything you're doing, especially because so much of this entire commerce experience is existing online now, and largely starting in social channels and then moving into a commerce and payment experience right in there. The ability for a partner like Onbe to be able to work with you, lay down a rewards and incentives platform, talk about some very specific goals, and then set up a campaign that's going to enable you to be able to read results, right? Get highly targeted spend back, drive the spend you're looking for for your organization. And then lastly, of course, at an aggregate level, right? We take privacy PII extraordinarily seriously and carefully, but that aggregate spend, think about then, where are your customers spending those dollars? What's the right demographic you should be targeting? What other brands are out there that you're seeing that spend data come through, and where you can then drive potential strategic partnerships with? That's a really, really, really powerful continuum. So of ultimately driving a program that you're going to see cheaper cost per acquisition, extension of that loyalty or lifetime value, and then really kind of revving up your overall corporate strategy. So that for us is why we were so thrilled to get back out here as Onbe to talk about this study that we did and share these findings with you all today. And then in terms of, if the question comes up, how do I get started? We're lucky to count actually a number of influencer and rewards platforms as some of our clients. Reach out to us. We're actually while we're not in that business, we're happy to connect you into those as we think about your ultimate incentives, payments, and awards. So I think at this point, Mel, should we move into the Q&A?
I think so, yeah. So before we hop into Q&A, if you want to keep the conversation going, if you have any questions, feel free to visit onbe.com/influencer study. You'll find a contact form and you'll be able to get in touch with us that way. All right. So first question, do you think influencers actually influence anyone? So yes, I mean, I think taking it back to the stat from earlier in our presentation, I think it was about 70% of those surveyed made a purchase based on an influencer recommendation. This number was surprising even to me, but it shows that influencers are truly highly engaging and they can help brands establish these more personal connections, I think, to their customers. I think they have this built-in following who looks to them for recommendations. So you're essentially tapping directly into this highly engaged audience who's probably ready to buy. Kev, anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I think you said it really well, Mel, and I know we have another question out there too, so we can get to that one.
Yep. All right. So next question is, thanks, this is interesting. How do I get started? Kev, I'll hand that over to you.
Yeah, sure. So I touched, on the takeaway side a little bit of this, but first and foremost, I would say this is going back to base principles, and both Melissa and I talked about it a little bit. Reach out to us. We should absolutely have a conversation with you. I think it's going to start with, what are your business objectives, right? So ultimately, within the line of business, the product and the service that you put out to the world, what are your goals? What are your cost per acquisition goals? What are your lifetime value goals? And then how do we think about bringing in a incentives and rewards experience where you're going to get that enriched data, you're going to get the ability to be able to, in a all digital way, if you want, to be able to deliver that award and get that spend back. So we'll work on getting that set up. And then again, from an influencer standpoint, I think if you're going to think about starting almost that as a net new channel, we have a number of recommendations of some of our existing partners and clients, many of which actually are on the phone today. So thank you all for joining. That we can point you in. But I think it honestly starts with a conversation that gets the business objectives, that then moves back to ultimately a place where we can get this stood up and get it stood up quickly and, as well, so you can test and learn and expand. So so I think those are the questions that have come in today. We are almost at the bottom of the hour, so Mel, any last words before we close out?
I don't think so. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Yeah, we really appreciate everyone taking the time today. Again, please reach out. You'll see us. This is going to be the first is Onbe of a series of research studies we're going to be doing. We're going to be hosting these webinars throughout the year. You are now on our list, so look out for them coming up. We want to make these better. As I mentioned, this is our first one. We would really appreciate it if you took a short survey that GoToWebinar is going to pop up before we leave. We want to get your feedback. We want to make these even better, even more informative. So let us know your feedback. And again, thank you very much for the time today. That is all from us here at Onbe.
Thank you.